Hello, and welcome to the Race, Wealth, and Health Podcast, a podcast that serves to educate and empower while we explore the intersections of social justice, economic empowerment, and holistic well-being within communities of color. I am your host, Dr. Joycelyn Morris, and I invite you to join me as we dive deep into the crucial topics that shape our lives, challenge the status quo, and strive for a more equitable future for all. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Race, Wealth, and Health. I am ecstatic to be joined by my colleague, Maria Razo. Maria, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, and I've been looking forward to this. You're the highlight of my day today.
I love being people's highlights. Maria is currently the Director of Alumni Engagement at MLT, also known as Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And it's a nonprofit organization whose mission is to advance racial equity. Maria will give us a little bit more about her experience there and how she started in this space. But I was really excited to bring her on to have this conversation with me. Maria has such a rich and interesting professional background and journey and your own unique experience around the topic specifically as it relates to race and wealth, both in the work that you do and your personal experience. So again, thank you for coming on and thank you in advance for sharing your story. I usually tell people how we met. So not obviously, Maria and I worked together. We met at MLT. And so we were briefly discussing it. We used to do these like new hire orientations. And so that's literally probably the first time I met her when I was in my marathon orientation like sessions. And I met Maria when she was talking about the work that she was doing with alumni group, which I thought was really interesting and definitely very impactful when we think about the numbers, which I'm sure you'll share some of that as we go along. But again, so excited to have you. And let's dig in. Tell me a little bit, or tell our listeners, I should say, a
Mhm.
little bit about yourself, like just personal background, and then we'll cover the professional stuff separately.
Sure. No, thank you so much for that. So I'm currently at the management leadership for tomorrow, started in April of 2021, but it was quite a journey to get me there. And it all relates to why I do the work that I do. I am of Mexican descent, and I came from Mexico, from a state, central Mexico, called Guanajuato when I was 6 years old. Mom decided that it was no longer okay for me to just survive, and she wanted to give me the opportunity to thrive. So by providing that opportunity, she did what she could, and then it was all up to me and luck. That's the sad part, right? That it shouldn't be luck. It should be a given. But there's a lot of luck in my story. So I came here when I was 6 years old. And it was when the unaccompanied minor thing was happening at the border. It really opened a lot of trauma I didn't know I had, because then I remembered my first experiences in elementary school. So I started first grade maybe a week after I came, and I didn't speak English. There was a
Mhm.
single form situation. I either learned and I succeed, or I drown and fall through the cracks, I guess. And through that really drove the work that I do. Deep poverty is where I come from in terms of being low income. It's not just low income, it was very low income, which is
Mhm.
some of the immigration story. If we had money, we wouldn't have immigrated. We had wealth, generational wealth, we wouldn't have immigrated. So that is the through line. So when I was about to graduate high school, the question was, so what's next? I was a pretty smart kid, did really well in school. I've always leaned towards more the academics than anything else. But I didn't know what the future held for me because I was undocumented. And so college wasn't really something that I thought about until my dad became a citizen before I graduated high school, literally almost immediately. And that made me a citizen automatically as well. So I was able to go to college at the price that a resident of California would pay. Otherwise, undocumented students, at least at that time, I'm not sure now, pay international fees, which is huge and unattainable for someone with my background. And that was my ticket out, right?
Yeah.
Just being able to go to college opened the doors to so many opportunities afterwards.
Yeah.
And not just for me, but for my entire family. And that was my way out of poverty. So that really cemented my why. And it's to put a dent in childhood poverty before I leave the world when I'm a very old lady. And that's the reason why I do the work I do.
Wow, like what a powerful story. I wanted to touch on that experience because I feel like we've seen a lot in terms of your point earlier about, children at the border, and there's been so much about immigration and talks of building walls and just all of this stuff. Tell our listeners a little bit more. One, clarify what it means to be an undocumented citizen and how did you even know? Because I know I've heard other stories of people where they were like, they didn't even realize they were undocumented. What was that experience growing up? And did it prevent you from being able to participate or engage in certain things within your childhood?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. So I was undocumented, meaning that I came into the country when I was a young child and make that choice, but it was made for me.
Mhm.
And it means that I didn't have a legal right. And I say that in quotes, right? Because there's no such thing as an illegal human. A legal right to be in the US because I wasn't born here. I didn't have a birth certificate, stated that I'm from the US. And a lot of the rights that come with being an American citizen, I didn't have that. I was always aware because as a young 6-year-old, when I learned how to read and write, I started also becoming my parents' translator or enrolling myself and my siblings at school, like filling out our paperwork. Then I started balancing their checkbook so that we could pay our bills, writing everything down because I started learning English really fast. That sink or swim situation, I swam. I didn't drown. And that made me really aware. And when I was younger, there was a governor in California who there was a there was some like a bit of a witch hunt for undocumented immigrants. And I can't recall the law right now, but anybody in California that lived here in the 90s remembers him and remembers what was going on. And the fear of the community, of my family, my parents, it wasn't something that was hidden from me.
Yeah.
So I always knew that the other shoe could drop at any moment, and I lived with that. Like nothing is permanent.
Hmm.
Yeah, we live a life here, and it could end at any time.
Yeah.
And ironically, or because of it, I live with that still. Like the other should be just dropped, even though I'm
Mm.
an American citizen now.
And that listen, that's a whole different conversation. We still are processing or even living through prior traumas or traumatic experiences, right? But one thing I wanted to ask, you mentioned at a young age becoming, translators for your parents. And I can only imagine the amount of responsibility, the parentification that happened during that time. But I'm curious, what was your experience? So you said as soon as you moved over a week later, you were put into first grade. What was your experience then in terms of learning English? Like, was there support for students at that time to learn English? And what was your early childhood academic experience here?
Yeah. So it was a weird situation. Now charter schools are a common thing now. But
Mm.
back when I was in first grade, we didn't call them charter schools. So it was a different school than the other schools of Long Beach Unified School District, which was where I went to school. It was a school where we were bused out of our neighborhood. So I had a local elementary school that I belonged to. But
Mhm.
because I was recently immigrated and I didn't speak English, they opened up another school where I had to take a bus to for kids like me, first and second graders. And the idea behind it, experiment maybe, was that if the teachers only spoke English, like they couldn't speak Spanish. If the teachers only spoke English and the kids only spoke Spanish, that we would just pick up the language really fast and then they could move us right back to our regular elementary school and be successful. So that was my the first thing. It was getting on a bus. Like I've never been separated from my mom. She dropped me off in the elementary school with my giant name tag and what school I belonged to because the bus driver made several stops so I don't like the little 6-year-olds wouldn't get off at the wrong one. We went to our school and it was a terrifying situation first. That being the first experience in an American school.
Yeah.
Once a week we had a woman, and I will forever be grateful to her. I reached out to her years ago as a 20-something-year-old to tell her how grateful I was for her. Her name was Mrs. Top, Gladys Top from Long Beach Unified School District. She's passed away now. But once a week, she would come to our school, get us in a little circle, and read to us in Spanish. And just being able to, I was getting emotional when I talk about her.
Mhm.
Just
That's
being
okay.
able to hear someone that sounded like home
Mhm.
was so hopeful. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have done as well. And all she did was read a book once a week to me. And I picked up the language. 2
Yeah.
years later, I moved to my local elementary school where I was supposed to be from the beginning, and then I really did well academically, so I guess it worked, but it wasn't necessarily the easiest path, but that was the
Yeah.
only resource available.
Yeah. No, I can only imagine. How could it be where you're just forced to figure it out? And I guess probably deal with a state of confusion for a period of time as you're trying to figure it out. Nevertheless, that you just moved to a brand new country and just all of these things. That's a lot of change. I feel like we as fully functional, and I say that in quotes, right? Fully functional adults often struggle to manage that much change at any one given time. So that's a lot. But of course, kudos to you and to your point, it worked. And I know you mentioned like even helping your parents with your siblings. So I guess just to confirm, where do you lie in your in birth order?
I'm the oldest, and
Okay.
there's, like, 2.5-year difference between the 4 of us, so
Okay.
we're all around the same age, which is why we've become so close, I think. Yeah, so it's 2 brothers. I'm the oldest, the sister, and then I've got 2 brothers and then my little sister at the end. So we bookend the boys.
Okay. Okay. So yes, okay. So your parents, and I'm guessing your dad then came over, right, at some point in time because it was just you and your mom in the beginning?
No, my dad came first. My dad
Okay.
worked in fields in the Central Valley, Madera, where all of the crops are harvested. He worked there in the late 80s, and then in the 90s is when my mom said, "We've gotta go." Like, I didn't really know my dad until I was 6. If I knew him before, I don't remember. I don't have memories of him. And he did go back at least twice, right? Because I've got 2 brothers from that. I know he was there. I don't have memories cemented. So he was here first. Then it was my 2 brothers, myself, and my mom. Then we came afterwards. My little sister was born here.
So she was born in the States. Okay.
Yes.
Got it. So you're in school, you're excelling, obviously, and doing well. What was your favorite subject when you were in grade school?
So, it's always been history.
Hmm.
It's always been history. I'm a history buff. I love everything about ancient history, American history. Then I started discovering my own roots with Mexican history when I became an
Mhm.
adult. It's history. And I think it has
Interesting.
a lot to do with the history that I left behind and I'm trying to reconnect with.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious, given our current political environment, what was your experience of history within the classroom? Being an adult now, knowing what you know now, do you feel like what was taught in class aligns with or was close to what is actual history? We know in certain states, specifically in Florida, like I'm in Florida, and some other states where it's just really rough right now when it talks
Yeah.
about like what they want students to learn versus not learn and, parts
Gas.
and versions of history, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's the same thing where when I was learning it, even about 1490, it's just a very sanitized view of
Mhm.
everything. Being Mexican, a lot of us with Mexican roots are also Native American. And once we discover, and I mean that pun, then it is bad, the sanitized view that we're taught. But you triggered a memory in me about me in US history class, 11th or 12th grade.
Mhm.
We had a substitute teacher. That was my favorite subject. My teacher, his name was Mr. Esparza. So shout out to him because he made history so much fun. And having a Latino teacher was just so incredible for me. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But he took a day off. He was sick or he went somewhere and he had a substitute. And it was an older gentleman. And we were learning about, I think it was the Mexican American War. And I sat in the back of the class and because I'm an introvert, that's what I did. And then he said, "Oh, I used to hunt wetbacks for a living when I was younger." And I just turned around and I didn't one is if adult Maria had heard that, adult Maria would have made a bigger deal because it was a huge deal. 11th grade Maria, who was just shocked to hear an adult say that in what I thought was a safe space, a classroom, was just shut down. But that was the tainting of my favorite subject.
And obviously that was a core memory, right? Something that has stuck
Yeah.
with you for years later. And how do you did you say anything? Like Did you
Yeah.
tell your parents? Did you even just share that experience with anyone? I'm assuming there were other Mexican students up in the class, correct?
Yeah, yes. La Mija is extremely diverse, and there are a lot of Latino kids there. I don't know if I heard it more because I was sitting right in front of him, or if the other kids just reacted like me in fear of, oh, hunts. He hunts wetbacks. It was scary. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my parents. One is, I think now as an adult looking back, is I wanted to also protect them, where they were working so hard just to help us survive that I didn't want to give them another thing to worry about. So I
Yeah.
just dealt with it. By dealing with it means I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I became an advocate later, but probably because I wanted an advocate at that point, someone I could talk to and they could do something about it. But I didn't have that. I didn't
Yeah.
have that, and I talked about it later as an adult. But
Yeah.
he's probably gone by now.
Probably. But you touched on something which I think is interesting. And I think a lot of us find ourselves in a similar places that we often ideally, right, try to be the person, the support, the fill in the gap of whatever it is that we needed or would have liked to have had. So I think that's really something powerful that you shared there. And I'm guessing that leads us into your professional trajectory. So as you finish school, I think you said you finished high school, right? You were able to become a citizen, so you were able to go to college. And so take me through that arc in your professional journey, how you kind of got where you are today.
Yeah. So I started working in education as a college student. And I don't know if it was luck or if it was choice. Going back to the comment of I became the adult I wanted to have, maybe I was being influenced by that subconsciously. And I started working in education with the same district, Long Beach Unified. There's this program, or there was a program called AVID, who worked inside of schools and targeted a certain group of students to get them to college. So I was a tutor. I was a college tutor for really the entirety of when I was in my college years. And what something that happens is where you start is kind of where your network builds, and then you just stick there for a bit. So when I graduated college, I applied to work for the district as an adult officially in a full time capacity. And I got there through a program called Gear Up. I came in on the 10th and final year of the grant. So I
Wow.
was only there for a year. And I knew that. They told me that from the beginning. But a year later, now I had something in my belt other than my tutoring days. Through college, though, I did work elsewhere. I had to hustle. I had to hustle. I worked at a car dealership as a receptionist and cashier. I worked as a private tutor for other high school students, knowing that, oh, I do this in the school, so I can also make a little bit of extra money to pay for books
Absolutely.
on the side there. And then when the Gear Up grant ended, I'm like, oh man, I'm out of a job again. But that's okay. I'll figure it out. One thing about me is I guess I figure it out. And I intend to figure it out on my own because of like everything makes sense now. So
Yeah.
as I'm trying to figure it out, an opportunity comes my way through a colleague where I was working that said, have you heard about this organization? And I'll name them, Green Up Public School, shout out to you, that they are going to do a thing called a turnaround for a school called Lock in here in it's a neighborhood in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And they are going to take the school, and the purpose to better the school. Like turnaround schools don't happen to schools that are overperforming. They are underserved schools, they are neglected schools,
Mhm.
and then that happens. The turnaround. It happens to corporate America too. When an organization is not doing well, someone comes in and they turn it around.
Right.
So that was my real first and permanent job after college, since the first one was going to be temporary. And as I am tutoring my on the side kid,
Mhm.
we're watching the news at the same time as I'm teaching him some math problem, I think. And his name was Jordan. Like I remember his name now. And on the news, there is a riot in Locke High School. And there's a bunch of kids, and then it's a major riot
Mhm.
to the point where I saw it in the news. And then I told Jordan, and I'm like, oh, I just got a job there. That was our final tutoring session. And we just looked at each other and we're like, oh, good luck, Maria.
Right.
Yeah. Thing is, even though the neighborhood I grew up in was not the best of gangs, especially in the 90s in Long Beach, I've been very sheltered by my mom, who is very overprotective to this day. So it's very sheltered. So me going in there by myself, big girl, I'm an adult now. It was quite an experience going in there, but I also bonded so much with the people I work with, but
Mhm.
it's trauma bond.
Well, listen, you said something there, right? Yeah, we form a lot of trauma bonds, both personally and professionally, to your point.
Yeah, no.
And so you kind of talked about it earlier, but let's make sure we make the connection of your why. What is, again, for our listeners, what is your why? When did you become clear that you wanted to, or that it was even an option for you to work within your why, your purpose and passion? Because a lot of times, especially immigrant communities, communities of color, where we come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, it's all about getting the jobs that are going to give us the money and the funds to be able to advance us out of poverty or that sort of thing, but you were very clear that you wanted to work
Mhm.
within your why, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it was my experience at Locke, and I did 2 turnarounds, so that was the first one, and I also came of age and graduated into the Great Recession. So, when
Yeah.
I graduated college, it's not like jobs were out there, right? Like, the thing that I was told is, "Put your head down, work hard, go to college, and you're gonna be set." That wasn't it. That wasn't it. And so when I started working at Locke, it was just supposed to be for 3 years, another one of those temporary where you're just gonna be here for 3 years and then it's done.
Mhm.
Another team is gonna come in and then just do the school permanently as part of the new model. We were just the turnaround team, per se. And so when I was there, I saw the hope, the desperation, and the pride in our community. It
Mhm.
was only Black kids. I'm not sure about demographics now, but I saw one is the diversity wasn't there. I'm from Long Beach, where like I think it's 60 different languages are spoken in just Long Beach, half a million people city.
Wow.
Then I go to Watts or South Central Los Angeles is where Locke is located. And it's just black and brown people. So people that look just like me, people that have my same lived experience, people that are just trying to make a better situation with the cards that they were dealt. It is what it is, right? That was what keeps us going. This is what it is, and I'm gonna make the best of it. I'm gonna try to get out and then come back and build in my community. And I met the greatest kids, the greatest team, and people that whose stories were so similar to mine that when the 3-year term there, my tour of duty, I guess, when my tour of duty ended, my boss, Ronnie Coleman, who raised me professionally, I always say that, she said, "Maria, I've been offered another school. Do you want to go with me?" That is when the why was cemented. Because when I joined, it was a job. It was during the Great Recession, and I just needed to make money.
Right.
One, because I'm still poor. I need a job. And more, my parents were aging. And it was always in the back of my mind that they were pouring everything they had and they made into my siblings and I. Eventually, I wanted for them to thrive with me. So I said, I'm going to do this for 3 years and then I'm going to probably go to corporate job. Hopefully, the economy is better by then and I can do that. But she asked me, and I didn't hesitate. I said, yes, I'll do it. Like, for me to put myself through that again, knowing what I know, it became a passion instead of just a way to make a living, and I
Mhm.
did it for 5 more years in a
That's
different.
awesome. And so for you, your why was sort of happenstance, or the idea of being able to work within your why was a little more happenstance than purposeful in the beginning, right?
That's right, yeah, and then my why is to alleviate or do my part to alleviate childhood poverty
Mm.
through the how at that time was through making better public schools. So
Mhm.
that kids that look like me and have my lived experience have had access to better schools. And that's what I did in the beginning,
Yeah.
or that's what I tried to do in the beginning.
Right. Right. Okay. So you started out in education. Were you, I'm assuming, teaching?
No, operations.
Operations.
So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So my whole thing about figuring things out when I was 6 years old and then back in elementary school, I was a problem solver and I leaned on that strength. And then I went when I joined the school systems, it was through an operational lens on how do I make this school operate better so that the principal is in the classroom coaching teachers so that the teachers can teach better and have the resources they need so that the kids are able to learn in an environment that's psychologically safe for them. That was how I did my why. And anything that was non-academic in the school was what I did, what I was responsible for.
No, that's really cool to know because I think a lot of times you think of school, you think immediately teaching or maybe a guidance counselor type role, but that is important. You're absolutely right. Like that operational role and making sure that the schools are functioning well is important. And it sounds like you were able to think about, to your point, what your natural strengths were and be able to bring that to an environment, to an organization that was doing the work that you were passionate
Mhm.
or you became passionate about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And remind me, what was your major undergraduate? Like, was it aligned with that? Because I know you
Yeah.
said the Great Recession. And this is
Mhm.
important too, right? Because sometimes we're
Yeah.
like, our students, we serve, college age undergraduate students. They get really locked in, like, this is what I'm going to do, and this is forever. But it's
Yeah.
just a
It's just a
starting
ticket
point.
in.
Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. No, I was a psych major. I've never actually done any, I guess, human interaction and my ability to work with people
fair.
and convince them to influence to them to do certain things as part of the work to serve others comes in handy. But no, it was just the degree. I needed the degree in order to open doors. And could I do the work that I've been doing now without it? Of course, but nobody would have given me a second thought or a second look.
No, you're right. You're
Yeah,
right.
and I think a big thing that I've learned through it is not to get don't put the lenses on. Don't get stuck in this, "Oh, I'm an econ major. I have to do this. I have to work in this field. Otherwise, I'm not gonna take a job that is not exactly fitting what I went to school for." You're just gonna lock yourself out of so many opportunities that way.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Enjoyed the show? Be sure to like and rate the podcast. You can find the Race, Wealth, and Health podcast on multiple platforms, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. I also want to hear from you, so don't forget to connect with me on social media. You can follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Race, Wealth, Health. By joining the online community, you'll stay updated on the latest episodes, behind the scenes insights, and engaging discussions. Share your thoughts, comments, and questions there. I appreciate your support in sharing the podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues who may also find value in these conversations. Thank you again for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care, stay informed, and keep up the good fight for equality.